right, so we just realized that as we step through this, right, the data that's coming from the server is not exactly what we were expecting, right? It was a promise, whatever that is. All right, if we hover over the users, notice that it's a promise that we're getting, not the data that we were expecting. All right, so let's explain what a promise is, right? So a promise is a new API, well, newish API that allows us to deal with asynchronous network communication, right? So if you notice, what's happening is that this find all users is going out through the network, right? It's generating this URL get go out to the server, right? And what's happening here is that that what we're getting back is not the actual data. Instead, what we're getting is a promise that at some point in the future, we will be notified that indeed that data did come back, right? And this is a mechanism that allows clients on the browsers not to block, not to have to wait for the data to come back from the server, right? To be able to talk to this server in asynchronous fashion as opposed to synchronous, having to block, right? So we have to do just a minor massaging here for this to work, right? So the API for promises looks as follows, right? First of all, the find all, right? This fetch here, indeed is returning indeed it is returning a promise that is true. And basically it's not blocking, meaning it's not waiting for the request to the response to come back. So it's not like I'm waiting here for this function to ever finish, right? Immediately the JavaScript thread just passes right through. It doesn't block waiting for this function to come back. It would be very dangerous to have the single thread JavaScript to just wait and block for this. You know, the service might not ever come back. The server might be down, right? So we can't risk waiting for the response to come back. So instead, what this returns is not users. It returns what is called a promise. A promise. Okay. Now this promise is basically what it allows us to do is register a callback and says, hey, at some point this is going to come back from the server. Tell me where do I call you? You know, where are you going to be so I can find you and give you the response that came back from the server. And the way we do that is through this promise object has a function called then. The then function allows us to register a callback. Register a callback. Right? So basically we're going to say, well, when it comes back from the server, who do you want me to notify? Well, indeed, we want you to notify render users. Exactly that function we want you to notify. See that? I want you to notify that function. And so let's try this again. Again, this is not quite yet going to work, not quite yet. But it's a little better. Let's refresh. Indeed, it's still not rendering. Actually, what it's doing is that it got something, right? But it's not quite what it is. See, you notice that it's doing some weird things, right? Let's see what it's coming back from the server, what we did. Let's put a breakpoint right here, and let's see what users we're getting, presumably. Let's see. If we hover over users, it's not quite the array we were expecting, right? Indeed, what we are actually getting here is the raw response that is coming back from the server, including headers, including status, including the body. And what we really care about is just the body. That's all we really care about. Okay, so we still need to do some massaging right here. This is not the user. It's a whole bunch of stuff in here. The body used, the headers, with maybe some cookies in there. You know, maybe the original URL that was used. So it's not quite yet what we want. Right? So to make this a little better, what we're going to do is that this find all users. Now this find all users, what we're going to do is that take before we return this fetch, we're going to use the promise. We can nest promises within promises to intercept the data that's coming back and do some transformations. Like for instance, we would like to be able to take that body that comes from the server and and extract it as a JSON object, and then say I don't want the raw ASCII coming from in the body. I want to reinterpret that as a JSON array coming from the server. So to do that, we're going to handle the promise right here. Right, this is going to be the raw response. There it is. That's coming. It's a function. It's we're going to do a function right here. Right, and that function is going to have the raw response, and we're going to in here just take the response, and that response has a function called JSON on it, which is responsible for converting whatever is inside the body of that response into a JSON representation, and that's what we're going to return. We return that JSON, that response body converted into JSON, right? All right, so let's try it again. Okay, notice that indeed now it's working, right? We have Alice, Bob, Charlie, and Dan, right, coming from the server. Did we not change Ada? Did we not change Ada? Let's see. We did change Ada. How come? Oh, I believe I left that for you to finish, right? I only did the username. Okay. So there you go. We were able to go fetch that. Let's clean this up just a little bit. This is a little bit hard to read. So let's put this then here so that it's a little bit easier to read. Also in the component client, instead of declaring this promise and then calling the then, we don't really need to do that, right? Because this object, this is the object that comes out of this. So we could just remove this promise, right, and do just that, right, and remove the semicolon here. And this is exactly the same code that we had earlier. It's a little bit more terse. We can also break this up into 2 lines so that we can understand that from the user servers, we're fetching the users, and then we are passing, we are consuming the response and then passing that response as a JSON object to the render all users. Okay. All right, there you have it. We have a client going to fetch data from the server, which is currently static, some hard-coded array, but certainly we could imagine that we can have this dynamic changing as we create new users, as we find users, we delete users, update users, and we can talk about that on Thursday. Right? All right, any questions?